Welcome to episode 100 of Our Republic. I'm excited to be here. So today we're going to talk about something that most people don't actually understand in our country, and that is the meaning of liberty. As liberty is one of the most abused words in the American life. Everyone claims it. Few agree on what it actually means. Some treat liberty as freedom to do whatever the hell they want. Others treat it as a feeling or a political slogan or something handed out by government when it feels generous. No, that's not how the American founders understood liberty. For them, liberty was not the absence of restraint. It was the presence of order. It was not freedom from all limits, but freedom within moral limits. And unless those limits existed before government, liberty could not survive once government appeared. So to understand America, you have to understand liberty the way our founders did. So welcome to episode 100 of Our Republic.
When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political band,
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not
Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
The founders made a sharp distinction between liberty and license. License meant the freedom to act without restraint, without accountability, without consequence. Liberty meant something entirely different. Liberty was the freedom to do what was right, not whatever is desired. It assumes that human beings are capable of governing themselves because they were governed internally by conscience, moral law, and belief. John Adams was blunt about this. He warned that liberty without virtue was not liberty at all, but the fastest road to tyranny. If citizens could not restrain themselves, government would step in and do it for them. And that belief did not come from political theory alone. Again, it comes from Christian teaching. The idea that man is fallen, imperfect, and prone to abuse of power runs straight through Scripture and into the America's founding. Liberty requires self-control. Without it, freedom collapses. The American understanding of liberty begins before constitutions, before laws, before elections. We've said that, right? Liberty existed because God created man with dignity, conscience, and responsibility. Government did not create liberty. Government couldn't wipe its own ass if it tried. Government exists to protect something that's already there. That's why the Declaration of Independence does not say rights are granted by Congress. It said rights are endowed by a creator. It's not poetic language. It's a legal claim. It means rights are not negotiable, revocable, or subject to majority vote. If liberty comes from government, government can take it away. If liberty comes from God, government is limited. This belief placed a permanent ceiling on political power. It meant rulers were under law, not above it. It meant no king, legislature, or court could redefine liberty at will. That assumption is the backbone of our American system. And the founders did not invent liberty out of thin air, right? They inherited it from long Christian traditions stretching back through English common law and biblical teaching, right? We talked about that, the Western Christian paideia. Scripture teaches that man is made in the image of God, and that alone establishes human dignity. It teaches that rulers are accountable, and it teaches that power corrupts. It teaches that law must be just, consistent, and restrained. And when early Americans spoke of liberty, they weren't rebelling against order. They were rebelling against tyranny that violated God's moral limits. That's why sermons, that is why sermons, not just pamphlets, fueled the revolution. Pastors preached about liberty because liberty was understood as moral condition, not merely a political one. And free people required consciences, and the church needs to get back to that. They need to grow a pair and stand against the garbage that's coming out of the government, not be scared against losing their nonprofit status. The founders repeatedly warned that liberty could not survive without virtue, and I'm trying to pound this in because most of our politicians lack it. It's not a threat, it's a diagnosis. A republic depends on citizens who tell truth, honor contracts, restrain impulses, raise families, and submit to moral law voluntarily. Without that, freedom becomes chaos, and chaos demands control. And that's why the left wants to grab the neck of every free American. George Washington warned that religion and morality were indispensable supports of political prosperity. He did not say optional, he said indispensable. This was not about establishing a church. It's literally about acknowledging reality. Liberty is fragile. It can't survive long among a people who reject restraint. The founders believed that if America ever abandoned virtue, liberty would be stolen from them. It'd be surrendered. Liberty doesn't eliminate law, it requires it. But law, an American understanding, is meant to restrain evil, not manage every aspect of life. Law set boundaries so freedom could operate safely within them. And when law expands beyond that role, liberty shrinks. The founders believed in limited government precisely because they believed law had limits. Civil law could punish crimes, but it couldn't manufacture virtue. It couldn't replace conscience. It couldn't save souls. That restraint is what kept liberty alive. The founders never confused liberty with equality of outcome. They believed all men were equal in dignity and under law, but not equal in ability, effort, or results. I mean, I'm just going to say it. I mean, Tony Robbins says, we're all equal in our souls, but we're not equal in the marketplace. That's exactly what I think they're saying right there. They believed all men were equal in dignity and under law, but not identical in ability, effort, or results. Liberty meant freedom to rise or fall based on choices, not guarantees imposed by this state. Attempts to enforce equality through power would always require coercion, and coercion destroys liberty. Right there is the basis of DEI. This is why they feared centralized government. A government strong enough to equalize outcome is strong enough to crush freedoms. Liberty accepts differences. Tyranny demands sameness. Liberty always carried responsibility in American tradition. We are free to speak, but accountable for lies, free to worship, but responsible for beliefs, free to own property, but bound to respect others' rights, free to govern ourselves, but expected to do so wisely. This balance made self-government possible. Liberty without responsibility is unsustainable. Responsibility without liberty is oppression, and the founders believed that America could handle both, or Americans can handle both. That belief built the republic. And when liberty is redefined as personal desire rather than moral freedom, everything changes. Right? Law becomes subjective, rights become conditional, and government expands to manage behavior that citizens once restrained themselves. The founders warned against this shift. I've said it tons of times. They understood that abandoning moral law does not eliminate rules. It replaces them with bureaucratic ones. Liberty doesn't die in one dramatic moment. It erodes as responsibility is transferred from one citizen to the state. That process is slow, quiet, and deadly. And it's killing our republic right now. True liberty is demanding. It requires discipline, restraint, and sacrifice. It asks more of an individual than tyranny ever does. Tyranny only asks obedience. Liberty demands character. That is why free societies are rare. It's easier to rule a people than to trust them. It's easier to regulate behavior than to cultivate virtue. I mean, that's what we need to get back to. We need to be cultivating a moral virtue in this nation. And we're leaving it up to pastors who freaking as unbiblical as any Democrat in office right now. The American experiment assumes something radical, that a people shaped by faith, family, and moral law could govern themselves. And liberty, again, depends on that assumption. Liberty, as the founders understood it, was not doing whatever the hell you wanted. It was about being free to do what was right without coercion. It was rooted in Christianity, restrained by law, protected by government, and sustained by virtue. And when any one of those elements is removed, liberty weakens. And when all are removed, it disappears entirely. Liberty is not inherited automatically. It must be practiced. Remember, it demands character. Liberty was never meant to be easy. It is meant to be worth defending. And American founders understood that freedom without restraint collapses, and restraint without freedom enslaves. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. Remember, history isn't boring. It's the story of a civilization that believed freedom could only survive where character, law, and belief all stood together. We'll see you next time.